Hello LinkedIn family and friends. So welcome to another sessions in fundamental JavaScript concepts. So in the previous session, I'm explaining about the JavaScript runtime environment in a deeper level. So not only that concept is there in the JavaScript runtime environment, in this session we are going to see another deeper understanding of the JavaScript runtime environment. So we had seen event loop, message queue and call stack and all those things. So we have a deeper understanding in that concept itself, right? So in this today's session, we are going to see the principle of call stack, how it works, the JavaScript call stack, how it works, right? So next, and again, I'm going to explain you the overview of the synchronous and asynchronous JavaScript. Why JavaScript is called synchronous with a blocking property, and why we have to make it as a asynchronous with non-blocking property. This is just an overview. The practical session, you will understand the deeper level understanding. So just an overview why it is called as a asynchronous blocking property, and why we need to make it as a asynchronous non-blocking property. So we have several mechanisms for that. So first we are going to see principle of call stack now in this session. So as I told you, call stack will work like line by line synchronous way, right? So for example, the simple explanation is if you have two console log statement in JavaScript, right? Console log statement log y, right? So what happens is the call stack, first it will take x will sit here, x will be printed in the console and it will be thrown out. Next it will execute this statement, it will shift this statement to the call stack, it will execute that statement, it will throw out that particular statement. This is how it generally works. So the principle in which the call stack works, is, sorry, this refers to the principle in which call stack works is first in last out or a last in first out. We are going to see what it is, what meant, right? What does it means, right? So I'll give you one perfect example. So let us take this example, right? So I'll write an example here. So you have one const outer function, right? You just have one const outer function. I'm writing an arrow function here. So inside this outer function, you have one inner function. Just consider one inner function. Inside the inner function, I'm performing console log statement here. And inside the outer function, what happens is I'm going to return this inner function, right? And then I'm going to call this outer function. Just observe carefully. This is a simple explanation of the principle of call stack, right? Simple explanation. So how it works generally. So consider this as a call stack, right? Call stack. So first, what happens is you can see the outer function, and when it executes in the JavaScript V8 engine, where it starts, the executable part starts from here. The outer function is called right here. So when outer function is called, the call stack will push this statement, the engine will push this statement to this particular call stack, and the outer function here, it will sit here in the call stack, right? So when outer function is called, inside the outer function there is an inner function. So inside the outer function, they are returning the inner function, right? So the inner function, this is also an executable statement. The inner function comes in and sits at the top of the call stack. When it returns the inner function, it will call the inner function. Inside the inner function, there is a console log statement, right? Hello. So hello will be printed here, console log statement. So when console log statement hello will be printed, it will be thrown out first, right? It will be thrown out first, and then it will throw out the inner function. Then it will throw out the outer function. So this is how the first in last out, or a last in first out. First is the outer function. The last going executable statement out of the call stack is outer. So the last is allowed. It is the first going out of the call stack. This is how the principle of call stack works generally. So this is pretty much what is that first in last out, or a last in first out. You can say anything you want, So when you can see, this is a simple explanation. First outer function comes here and sits in the call stack, and then the inner function will be called, and then the inner function will sit, and the console log statement will be printed, and that statement will be thrown out first, and then inner function will be thrown out next, then the outer function will be thrown out last. So this is how call stack behind the scene works. So this is the principle of call stack. So this pretty much explains how the call stack works behind the scenes, right? So this is pretty much it. Principle of call stack. So the next video, so next concept is overview of synchronous and asynchronous. So generally, what is meant by synchronous? As I told you in the earlier session, synchronous is top to bottom, line by line execution. Top to bottom, line by line execution. Generally, JavaScript is top to bottom, it will execute the code line by line. Okay. So for example, I'll show you one beautiful example: console log X, console log Y. Suppose you just imagine there is another statement which will take so much time to execute. So again you have one more console log statement, right? Console log Z. So this part is, it will take time, and it's outside the JavaScript code, right? Outside the JavaScript code. So when the V8 engine executes the code, it goes line by line, and what happens is, when it sees this part of a code which takes a lot of time, right? What happens is, this part of code, what JavaScript V8 engine does is, so this will be, the call stack will move the statement to browser environment. Browser environment. Inside this browser environment, we have event loop and message queue, which will maintain this part of the asynchronous code. This is nothing but an asynchronous code, that is outside JavaScript code, right? So this event loop will check the call stack every time. Every time it will check the call stack, whether it is empty or not. So this part of code will be moved to the message queue. Okay, message queue. So it will block this line execution, right? What is happening? Generally, it is blocking this line of execution, right? It will go to the next line of execution. It will not wait for this execution part. Immediately, it will move to the message queue. Message queue will store that asynchronous code, right? That is why the JavaScript is known as a synchronous with a blocking property. Synchronous with a blocking property, because it is blocking the asynchronous code execution, right? So that is why it is known as a synchronous with a blocking property. So this is what a synchronous code is. Synchronous means it executes line by line, and it will not wait for the execution of the asynchronous code. Instead, it will push that asynchronous code to the browser environment, in which message queue will be present. That message queue will store the asynchronous code, right? After execution of all the JavaScript code, then it will execute this asynchronous part of the code. So then generally what it is doing is, it is blocking that execution. Suppose if you want, before this statement, if you want to fetch some user information from the data server or a database or a remote server, so you are not going to fetch those immediately because it blocks that interactivity. Web browser will block that interactivity, right, at that time. So that immediately next subsequent statement is there, right, that will be executed. The asynchronous code will be not executed. So that is why it is known as a synchronous with a blocking property. So what we do, this is an con, right? It is a con in JavaScript. So then comes the concept called as a asynchronous JavaScript. That is why we need asynchronous JavaScript. To make it as a non-blocking code, we need asynchronous JavaScript. So that is the beauty of the asynchronous JavaScript. So suppose if you have the same example, I will take console log x, console log y. Okay, this is JavaScript code. You have on the third line, you have some asynchronous code, right? Asynchronous code you have. Okay, third line, and then you have console log z. So this is the beauty of asynchronous JavaScript. So asynchronous JavaScript contains several mechanisms. So those mechanisms include callback. I will explain you detailedly all those mechanisms just for overview. Callback functions, promises, async await, timer function like set timeout, set interval, all those timer functions, and many more. Okay, many more. These are the major one. So by using these mechanisms, we are going to make this JavaScript code as an asynchronous JavaScript. By using those mechanisms, we are going to make this as asynchronous JavaScript. So when this asynchronous code is there, we are going to apply these mechanisms to that asynchronous JavaScript code. We are going to apply these mechanisms. So when we apply these mechanisms into that asynchronous codes, this will not block the interactivity. This will not block the interactivity of the web browser. So it will not wait for so it will execute this line first, it will execute next line, and then it will not block the execution of the asynchronous code. When we use the mechanisms like this, it will not block the asynchronous code. These mechanisms ensures that this asynchronous code will be executed. When the asynchronous code is executed, then this mechanism will be called, like promises and all those things. So after what generally behind the scenes, what is doing this, it is making sure the asynchronous code is being executed, right? When the execution is success, then only it will execute the further statement, correct? So this way we are making the JavaScript code as a non-blocking. So this is pretty much it, the understanding. So this is what synchronous and asynchronous JavaScript is, right? We are making it as a non-blocking functionality. So I will tell you one good example, right? So let me tell you. This pretty much you